Hi, I'm Rob Wade. I'm the Outdoor Education Coordinator for the Plumas County Office of Education in the Plumas Unified School District. Well, why are wetlands important to me personally? As a child, I think we all have a radar for water. And I grew up in the San Joaquin Valley of California, farmland, and got to experience a lot of wetland. But I wouldn't say that I had a lot of conscious connection with how important it was until a little bit later. I would have to say when I was living and working in the Lake Tahoe Basin, swinging a hammer actually was my profession at the time. And a friend who was running an after school program called Adopt a Watershed invited me to come and lend her a hand. And I did. And the more I did it, the more I loved it. And not, part of it was working with kids, but the other part of it was what we were studying, which was their watershed, this local basin that holds their life and holds the nature, culture of their place, and water from the ridges all the way down to the lake, at least in that location, really define the sense of place there. So that's where I would say I first connected around the importance of water and wetlands. I think that went a little bit further for me a few years later when I relocated to the Upper Feather River watershed, which is north of Tahoe in the Sierra Nevada. Actually, 20 years ago, right around this time, I was involved in a couple of launches. One of them was I'm a founding board member for the Feather River Land Trust. And there wasn't a land conservation organization dedicated to our region. And some other conservation-minded friends and I pulled our resources and our passion together to launch that organization. And a lot of it was because while 65% of our region is public land, most of these upper montane valleys where the wetlands are all private land. And there were some development pressures that were going on there. And so we knew that we had a responsibility for these real critical and biodiverse upper montane valleys to do what we could to conserve them. And that was 20 years ago that we launched the Feather River Land Trust, which happens to also be the same year as an educator, because I hung up my tool belt and my construction background, and I went back to school to become an educator. And I launched a watershed education program in our 6th grade. And in 2000, I also started this program where we follow the Feather River from the headwaters where we live all the way to the ocean. And we do it throughout the course of the year with a culminating 5-day, 4-night trip where we follow the Feather River down through the canyons into the Central Valley, into the Delta and the estuary, all the way to the ocean. And along the way, we get to encounter a lot of different phenomena. And one of the things that the kids learn about during that 6th grade year is how in California we've lost 90 to 95% of the historic wetlands. And that's a shocking number for anybody. And that's one that I bring to my students. And I sometimes actually couch it in money. For some reason, it just lands a little bit more powerfully for them. I tell them if I gave them $100 and then someone came and took $95 away, they'd still have 5, and they should be maybe happy they have 5, but what do they think about it? And they always almost say the same thing. They feel ripped off. And so giving them that kind of punctuation, we're able to look at the land and the wetlands that we're visiting and try and multiply that out. It's like, what if we could have those 95% wetlands back? We can't turn back the clock, but we can protect what we have now. And we can possibly reclaim some of those wetlands that were lost along the way. My primary audience is, it's kids. I work with kindergarten through 12th grade students, knowing these are formative times of their lives. And so I feel that if I work with this current rising generation, then the voting, influential generations of the future will be coming from a place of connection and information and knowledge and understanding. And so, I really start there. And my homework often to my students is to go home and teach their parents and see if they can kind of nudge that needle into a different location. You know, our wetlands, water is life, and our wetlands are quite diminished from what they were historically. And so I just think it's so critical to teach the children about the cycles, about life, about wetlands, and obviously the entire general public about that, because we all depend upon it. And the limited biodiversity that we have in this country is so supported by wetlands. The plant and animal diversity is just literally fed by these wetland areas that we have around the country. I can speak a little bit more to the place I live. And I know that as from a science standpoint, as I'm studying the carrying capacity of a watershed and of a place and of a state, of a bioregion, I'm also really concerned about what I call the carrying capacity, which is the capacity that a child or an adult, any human being, has to care about the place. They should come from a place of being informed and evidence, knowledge, but they do have to care. And if they don't care, then behaviors don't change, and very little else can change. And so I'm very passionate about trying to shift those attitudes and those behaviors for our general public. But again, starting with the littles, because the littles don't stay little; they become big, just like we have, and they'll be the ones who will be making decision and defining policy and carrying on protections in an enduring sort of perpetuity way, which is something that matters a lot to me, is perpetuity and endurance of the things that we're doing to care for the land.